have not gotten to the point that they're mature enough to assume, to understand that all men are created equal. With the amount of legislation that's happening today that is discriminatory, that is holding African Americans down, that's holding Asian Americans down, the hatred that is an upswelling of political force.
On this episode, it feels like we're regressing.
Yeah.
And I think it is absurd to assume that the time is now is when we need to end affirmative action. If anything, we might need to go the other way with it to make it more affirmative, right? Because things seem to be only getting worse, and that's going to be a common theme here. We also have the opposing view, and this is from Justice Sonia Sotomayor. She said that the court subverts the constitutional guarantee of equal protection by further entrenching racial inequality in education, the very foundation of our democratic government and pluralistic society. Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, the court's first black female justice, also chimed in saying, with Let Them Eat Cake obliviousness today, the majority pulls the ripcord and announces colorblindness for all by legal fiat. Sorry. When you're quoting Supreme Court justice, they're much smarter than I am. But deeming race irrelevant in law does not make it so in life, which is exactly what we just talked about. Just because you say it's that idea of like a post-racial America, right? Like we elected Obama, racism's over. It's like, no, it's not.
Right.
And that is clearly being reflected here as well.
Yeah, no, and the problem that we run into here is that what the majority are arguing here is they're arguing the point of a fiction, that in a perfect world, we shouldn't need this legislation. And they're right. In a perfect world, we shouldn't. The world we live in is far from perfect.
Yeah.
And this happened to be a stopgap measure to make things better. Nothing else has happened in this world to make that situation better. Mm-hmm. If anything, that situation's gotten worse. So by taking away some of the safeties that you had in place to try to provide legal protections for people, you're doing your part. You're being part of the problem, not part of the solution at that point.
Yeah, why did they do this? Just to have a rule?
Are the more aggressive,
and that you're supposed to not like big government, right?
Exactly.
And this is the opposite of that. This is the biggest government.
Well, you could argue that this is a limitation of government because it's government making impositions over the schools. And they're saying, well, government shouldn't do that anymore. The schools need to regulate themselves.
I more so meant the 6-3 majority basically being able to do whatever it wants without being stopped.
Yeah, no, I agree. But I think
I see what you mean though.
The motivation that they have at this point in time is, we're a progressive Supreme Court now. We're going to do things right the way that we see it. We're going to make the changes that should have been made years ago, and they're going to undo what's being undone. And there's a couple overridden.
Who watches the Watchmen,
Right. So they're delegitimizing the Supreme Court. So that's probably one of the biggest problems that you run into. The other problem is the things that haven't been ruled on, that really are important stuff that need to be ruled on, are being pushed to the side so that they can use this agenda that they have to rewrite the rules that have already been written. So you're hurting the country. Be a part of the solution, not a part of the problem.
And, you talk about that correcting itself, so the Supreme Court overriding itself. It's like, it really does. I didn't even think about that until just now. It really does have a very harmful effect because that basically could eliminate precedent in general. Because
absolutely,
if they rule on now and then in 10 years there's different judges and they just are like, no, that's not, we're just going to get rid of that. It's like, well, then what was even the point of doing it in the first place? It's like, it's all temporary until, you have a majority the other way that comes in and just does everything the other way. It does really delegitimize the whole process.
And that's what we've seen with, don't expect that from our Supreme Court. We deserve better from our Supreme Court because these are appointed positions. They don't have to campaign. They don't have to get elected. They're not chosen by the people. They're handpicked. They're cherry-picked by the president, and it's for life. And they be considered in all NFL coaching hiring decisions to employment and promotion decisions, the diversity, equity, and inclusion programs in schools and workplaces, and much more. The Supreme Court literally just said discrimination is legal.
Yeah.
That's what this decision says. And that is exceedingly dangerous for this country.
And I really think it is naive too, because how are you able to exist, especially as a Supreme Court justice, where you've been dealing with law your entire life? Surely you'd be able to see that people are not treated equally, right? These things, if you let things run themselves, they will not run well, right? Like, it's not going to just fix itself. It's not going to be equal if you let people do it, because like we talked about at the top of this break, affirmative action was put in the first place because it wasn't equal. So it's like, do you think that's just going to magically fix itself, especially now when, hate crimes are on the rise and discrimination's worse than it has been in a very long time? And, but then again, maybe that's all part of the plan.
Well, and I'll be the first one to say, I watched the hearings when Clarence Thomas was up for Supreme Court nominations, and the questions that he was asked and how racially biased the people that were questioning him from the other side were, and that was Democrats questioning him at the time. It was brutal. And that was a small fraction of what he's had to put up with his whole life. Because he's a man who has set precedent his entire life with his career, African American. So
and that was point number one.
Yeah.
We've got two more to do.
That was rough. We're going to take another quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about
Insights into Entertainment, a podcast series taking a deeper look into entertainment and media. Episodes at youtube.com/insightsintothings. Our audio episodes at podcast.insightsintoentertainment.com, or check us out on the web at
For millions of Americans, the 6-3 decision, we've heard that number a lot, with conservative justices in the majority, said the Biden administration overstepped its authority with the plan, and it left borrowers on the hook for repayments that are expected to resume in the fall. The court held that the administration needed Congress's
businesses, and those loans were forgiven. But when it came to providing relief for millions of hardworking Americans, they did everything in their power to stop it.
That's actually a pretty good quote from Biden.
Yeah.
I feel like we don't get a lot of those.
I'm sure it was written and somebody else wrote it.
Loan repayments will resume in October. Can't wait for that. Although interest will begin accruing in September. The interest is where they get you, by the way. The Education Department has announced payments have been on hold since the start of the coronavirus pandemic more than 3 years ago. Oh my God, where does the time go? The forgiveness program would have canceled $10,000 in student loan debt for those making less than $125